hundreds of emails, I have made my decision. By pulling my opening October 3rd, you, ESPN, stepped on the toes of the First Amendment freedom of speech. So therefore, me, my song, and all my rowdy friends are out of here. It's been a great run. For a man who never played it down or called a game, he has attracted a lot of attention. So far on ESPN.com, there are more than 8,000 comments following our story about this. And on Twitter, the reaction has been split nearly 50-50 between those supporting his decision and those who are opposed. Let's talk about it. Ken Paulson is the president and CEO of the First Amendment Center at Vanderbilt University. He's also a longtime newspaper editor and an attorney. Alexandra Petri is an editorial writer at the Washington Post and a columnist. Dave Zirin is the sports editor of The Nation. Dave, let me start with you. What did you think about ESPN's decision today?
Well, I think ESPN didn't have a choice at this point. I mean, Hank Williams Jr. is somebody who said something that was profoundly offensive, not just to the millions of people who died in the Holocaust, and of course it trivialized the Holocaust to invoke Hitler, but it's a long-standing meme in American politics to compare Barack Obama to Adolf Hitler, Obama with the little Hitler mustache. But honestly, my problem is much more with the fact that ESPN had Hank Williams Jr. hired in the first place. I mean, if you lent Lindsay Lohan your car and she got a DUI, is that Lindsay Lohan's fault or your fault? I mean, Hank Williams Jr. once wrote a song called If the South Had Won, which is about a utopia that would have taken place if the Confederacy had won the Civil War. I mean, this shouldn't surprise anybody that he got himself in hot water. The question is why he was employed so long in such a public position.
Alexander, saw your column today on WashingtonPost.com. You didn't think ESPN made the right decision. Why is that?
Well, as Oscar Wilde says, the mere fact of a man's being a poisoner is nothing against his poetry. And, I mean, I think the fact that Hank Williams has made the Hitler analogy, which, as I think anyone who's ever been in public life knows, you never compare anyone to Hitler, ever. You automatically lose the argument. It's Godwin's first law of, like, internet commentary. You just don't. But that being said, does it make it any less poignant when he asks us, is it time for football? I don't think it impacts. I mean, I don't care what his political perspective is. I just want to listen to the same guy asking if it's time for football as usual.
Well, Ken, Dave, go ahead. So, Ken, let me bring in Ken in, actually, because there's an important distinction that needs to be made. Ken, he said in his statement that ESPN was stepping on the toes of the First Amendment. Could you please draw for us the distinction between the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights and the concept of freedom of speech?
Sure. Well, first of all, the First Amendment is a powerful and beautiful thing ratified in this country in 1791, and it starts with these words: Congress shall make no law. It does not say ESPN shall make no law. The bottom line here is the First Amendment was designed to protect us from the government. The government cannot limit our free speech. But you know what? Most times your employer can, or those with whom you have a contract. And if you think you have free speech in your workplace, I suggest you drop a list of grievances, gather together your coworkers, march on the boss's office, and see how that works out. I think there's an argument the spirit of free speech was violated, but the First Amendment was not violated.
Yeah, Dave, to get back to Alexandra's point before, what do Hank Williams Jr.'s views on anything really have to do with his ability to announce it's time for Monday Night Football?
Well, really, one has nothing to do with the other, but you do have to reckon with the fact that the NFL is the most popular sport in the United States. The Sunday night telecast on NBC was the #1 rated television show last year in all of TV. It's really one of the last cultural institutions in our country that actually tries to unite people instead of segregating and segmenting people off in little bits. And you just look at this past weekend where the NFL did Breast Cancer Awareness Week with the players tinted in pink. The NFL is always trying to be all things to all people, and to have as the spokesperson of their flagship show someone who would be viscerally offensive, first of all, to the 70% of NFL players who happen to be African American. Second of all, anybody who, frankly, isn't that upset that the South lost the Civil War, then it becomes a different question altogether. I mean, the NFL clearly has a responsibility to its product. ESPN clearly has a responsibility to its viewers. And I go back to the question about, once again, like, why would you, if you play with a scorpion, don't be shocked if you get stung. Like, why do you have Hank Williams do it if you think he's going to be peachy keen once the cameras are turned off?
Right. Alexandra, obviously there's no violation of law here, an actual First Amendment violation, but is there a free speech issue?
I think it's getting back to the point that you said it's the most watched program and it's something that brings Americans together. It's not bringing people together because they all think, oh man, I'm looking forward to hearing some really inoffensive announcements. They're looking forward to the football. I mean, I think the biggest problem with what he said might have been that he talked about golf because, ooh, you know, that's un-American. You're sitting there with your trying to keep your head level, wearing something that looks like you fell out of a Sky Mall catalog. You know, I don't know. I think the more serious point is that it's about the game and not about Hank Williams' personal perspective. If anyone talks long enough, they're bound to make a career-ending gaffe. That's the first law of talking.
Ken, this is we are owned by a company that has shareholders. When you look at a corporate decision that was made, you know, right here, how well do you think people out there in the public separate Hank Williams from what he says and identify what he said with the program that his song was running on?
You know, it's interesting. The battlefield is littered with the stories of people who have been Rush Limbaugh and others who have said things that were negatively received and they lost their jobs. In this case, Hank Williams' comments about the president had nothing to do with the way he does his job. The man comes out. They record him a number of times, for different cities and different games. No one argues that he's singing the rowdy song badly. So others who have lost their jobs in the communications business, in the media business, it happens all the time because people say the wrong thing at the wrong time. It typically has to do with the way they do their job. In this case, the man is a U.S. citizen. He's expressing his opinion. And what's scary here is, the talk about him recording a song that was sympathetic to the South. He shouldn't be allowed to sing on a national television broadcast. That's nuts. In this country, we have a right to free speech. And it's a scary time if a lot of people